The shelter smelled of bleach and forgotten hopes. Jim Wilson, 58, and built like someone who used to wear a uniform, stood frozen before kennel No. 19. Sweat trickled down his back, despite the overzealous air conditioning. Inside the chain-link pen sat a German shepherd, unlike any he'd ever seen. One eye a sharp amber, the other clouded like storm glass. His coat bore the map of battles, fought patches of missing fur, raised scars, the evidence of a life lived on the edge. The dog didn't bark, didn't wag, didn't even flinch. He simply watched Jim with unnerving stillness. Assessment, not fear, not aggression, just cool, practiced calculation. The volunteer, a silver-haired woman with mop in hand and battlefield eyes of her own, muttered, "He's just different." Jim crouched, joints protesting. That's when he noticed it, a brass tag hanging from the frayed collar. The engraving, nearly worn smooth, caught the light just enough. 7 words. "If you're reading this, I was loved once." Something cracked in Jim's chest. He hadn't meant to adopt a dog. His VA therapist had suggested volunteering. Purpose, she'd said. He'd lost Martha to cancer, lost Rusty, his golden retriever. Lost count of the night's terror dragged him out of sleep, soaked in memory and sweat. He didn't want another dog. Not really. But this one was different. The shelter called him Reggie. About 10 years old. No microchip. No medical records. Found wandering near the highway. Didn't bark. Didn't play. Never responded to his name. The paperwork was thin. The history thinner. But Jim saw what others didn't. The scar pattern across the dog's ribs wasn't random. Shrapnel damage. The surgical seam along his shoulder, field medicine. And the way he moved, controlled. Quiet. Vigilant. He wasn't just a stray. He was trained. Disciplined. Still serving even in abandonment. Jim stood. The dog's mismatched eyes tracked the motion steady. No tail wag. No step forward. Still as a statue carved in grief and silence. "Let's go, soldier," Jim said softly. The dog didn't respond, but he followed. The farmhouse felt cavernous that first night. Jim moved through the rooms, with a veteran's practiced rhythm lights on doors, checked locks confirmed. Behind him, always 3 paces back, padded the soundless steps of the German shepherd. No name, yet not truly. Reggie had no effect. The dog didn't seem to notice, let alone claim it. When Jim sat, the dog sat. When he stood, the dog stood. Not in mimicry, in duty. He set down Rusty's old bed in the living room, washed and waiting. The German shepherd ignored it instead, lowering himself in front of the front door, nose pointed outward, body perfectly aligned. His eyes remained open, though his chest rose and fell, in the rhythm of a resting soldier. Sentry position. Jim knew it. He'd slept the same way in the desert. "You're off duty," Jim murmured. No response. At 2:00 a.m., the nightmare came like it always did. Sand, screams, the flash before the silence. He jolted upright, gasping, and there he was. The dog standing beside the bed like a ghost in the dark. No bark, no whine, just watching, waiting, assessing. Then, without a sound, the dog turned and lay across the bedroom threshold, resuming his post. The morning brought more clues. The shepherd refused food until Jim unknowingly gave a hand signal, something simple from his old squad days. A flick of the wrist. Approval. Then he ate. He never passed through doorways first. Always waited. Watched. When Jim showered, the dog lay stretched across the bathroom entrance, like a living barricade, his ears twitching at the sound of rushing water, his body taut until Jim stepped out. By day 3, there was no denying it. This wasn't just a lost pet. This was a retired soldier. Jim stirred, scrambled eggs, and talked aloud, more to himself than the shepherd. Military, maybe K9 unit. Bomb detection sentry work. The only reply was a faint twitch of an ear at the word military. That night they sat on the porch together. Summer cornfields rustled under a golden sky. A breeze carried wind chimes from the neighbor's yard. Suddenly the dog stiffened, rigid, eyes locked on the distant tree line. Jim followed his gaze, saw nothing, but he knew better than to doubt a soldier's instinct. By week's end, the rhythm between them had become ritual. Jim didn't speak much, but he'd find himself narrating his day out loud, and the German shepherd would listen, not with the vacant stare of a pet, but the focus of a comrade. He shadowed Jim through chores, always scanning corners, always between him and the door. Not one bark, not one tail wag. Yet presence had never felt so tangible. Then came the knock. Richard Thompson, president of the Mapleton Homeowners Association, stood at Jim's gate with his arms crossed and judgment radiating off him like heat. Jim barely had time to greet him before the shepherd moved, quiet, deliberate, placing himself between Jim and Thompson, body tense, but not aggressive. "That the shelter dog?" Thompson asked, eyes narrowing. "Looks like he's seen combat." "Seems that way," Jim replied evenly. "We have rules about dangerous breeds, especially now with the summer fair. Children everywhere. He hasn't shown a single sign of aggression." "That's what worries me," Thompson snapped. "Silence like that means training, means a trigger we can't see coming." Jim held his ground. The dog didn't move, didn't flinch, just held position. Tension hummed in the air. "He's staying," Jim said finally, voice low but final. Thompson's lips curled. "We'll see." The HOA has procedures. By that afternoon, the phone calls started. Neighbors who'd heard rumors of a combat dog. The shelter director called too, voice tight with worry. "He hasn't even barked," Jim insisted. "Exactly," she replied. "That kind of silence. It can mean trauma, or silent strike training." Jim hung up with a bitter taste in his mouth. That night, the shepherd laid at his post, eyes open. Jim watched him for a long time from his chair, the light casting long shadows between them. "If they want a war," Jim muttered, reaching down to stroke the scarred head, "they've picked the wrong soldier." No response. But the shepherd leaned slightly into his hand. For the first time, the silence felt like solidarity. The threat of the HOA's complaint didn't slow Jim down. He'd been through worse war zones, where every alley hummed with danger nights, where survival meant listening for the click that never came. Compared to that, Richard Thompson was just another noise in the background. But he hadn't expected the shelter to waver. "They're reviewing his case," the director had said, hesitant. "If complaints escalate, we may need to reassess the adoption." "On what grounds?" "No aggression." "But his silence is unusual." Jim stared at the brass tag again. "If you're reading this, I was loved once." That wasn't just nostalgia, it was a vow. He watched the German shepherd as he paced the perimeter of the house at dawn, each step measured. This wasn't a pet. This was someone still in service, even if no one had asked him to be. The summer fair approached with heavy air and heavier judgment. Flyers had gone up, anonymous warnings about dangerous breeds attending the fair. Jim ignored them. Instead, he woke early, dressed in his cleanest jeans and old boots, and clipped the leash to the shepherd's collar. They arrived before the crowds. The shepherd walked at perfect heel, silent as a ghost, his scars drawing glances and widening space around them. Children peeked from behind booths. Parents whispered. Thompson spotted them and stormed forward, 2 HOA members in tow. "This is a violation," he snapped. "I sent a cease and desist letter." "I threw it away," Jim replied. "You don't own the park." Thompson's protest was cut off by a scream. A child, no more than 5, had broken through the rotted dock and fallen into the pond. His mother screamed, kicking off her shoes, panic flooding the air. Jim turned, but the shepherd was already moving. He bounded toward the pond in a blur of muscle and instinct cutting through the water, like he'd done it 100 times. The crowd froze. The boy thrashed. The shepherd reached him in seconds, circled behind him, guided him to shore with precise nudges. Not a single bark. Not a single mistake. The mother met them, waist-deep, sobbing arms outstretched. Only when the boy was safe did the shepherd turn and swim back to Jim, emerging with heavy breath and quiet pride. And for the first time since they met, he accepted the touch of a stranger. The pond incident turned everything. Whispers became applause. The mother of the saved child wept as she pressed her lips to the shepherd's wet head, whispering, "Thank you," over and over again. For the first time, the German shepherd didn't flinch at a stranger's touch. Jim watched it all stunned, yet unsurprised. It confirmed everything he'd suspected. This wasn't just instinct. This was training. That night, Jim examined the brass tag again. It had always caught his eye, but now he turned it over and discovered something he'd missed. Barely legible after years of wear was an address etched so faintly he needed a magnifying glass to decipher it. An address in Mapleton, across town, near the Veterans Memorial. He didn't hesitate. The next morning, Jim and the German shepherd drove to the address. It was a small ranch-style house with a flag on the porch. He knocked, unsure what he'd say. "I think I have your dog," felt grossly inadequate. The door opened to reveal an elderly man with a cane, sharp eyes, and a quiet wariness that Jim recognized. Soldier's eyes. When the man saw the dog, he didn't speak. He just whispered, "Tucker." The name slid through the air like a forgotten melody. The shepherd Reggie no longer paused. Then his ears perked. His tail gave a tentative wag. It was subtle, uncertain, but it was the first Jim had ever seen. The old man dropped to his knees despite the pain. "I thought I'd lost you too," he said, voice cracking. His name was Harold Mason. Over cold coffee, he told Jim the rest of the story. Tucker had been his son, David's partner. A military working dog in Afghanistan, trained in explosive detection. 3 tours, dozens of lives saved. When David's service ended, he fought bureaucracy to adopt Tucker. They came home together, but cancer took David at 29. Agent Orange exposure, they suspected. Through chemo, through hospice, Tucker stayed by his side. After David passed, Tucker withdrew, stopped responding. When Harold's health failed, his nephew tried caring for Tucker, but the dog ran away. They searched. Weeks passed. Nothing. Until now. Tucker sat beside Harold like a soldier, returning home, not animated, not emotional, just present in the way that spoke volumes. The old man stroked the dog's scarred head with trembling fingers. Tucker didn't pull away. He closed his eyes, leaned in ever so slightly. He was loved. Harold said, his voice a whisper in the stillness. More than you can imagine. He told Jim how David had ordered that tag after his diagnosis. Said if they ever got separated, he wanted Tucker to know he was loved. Jim offered to return Tucker, but Harold shook his head. Look at him. Look how he stands with you. David would say Tucker's found his new mission. And I'm moving soon. Assisted living. No pets allowed. He gripped Jim's hand. Just promise you'll let me see him. Now and then. When they left that house, something in Tucker changed. A lightness to his step. A sense of peace. He still didn't bark. Still didn't play. But the weight he'd carried seemed to have shifted, set down, if only slightly. Back at the farmhouse, Jim sat on the porch swing, while Tucker lay at his feet. The sky blushed with the last light of day. Fireflies blinked. For the first time, Jim said the name. Tucker. The shepherd looked up. Tucker, he repeated, and slowly, deliberately, the dog's tail wagged. The following week, the thought lingered in Jim's mind, like a quiet knock. This dog still has more to give. He watched Tucker patrol the yard with precision. Not out of anxiety, but instinct. He thought of all the people, struggling kids, vets, the lonely, and how Tucker might be more than a rescue. Maybe he was meant to do the rescuing. Jim picked up the phone and called Dr. Sanders, his VA therapist. "I want to train him," he said, "to be a therapy dog." There was a pause. "That's ambitious," she said, "especially at his age. But there are programs for retired working dogs. It won't be easy." Jim glanced at Tucker, who had just sat down at the perfect center of the porch, watching the horizon. "I don't want easy," Jim said. "I want purpose." And for the first time in years, he felt like he had one. The veteran center smelled of old books, hand sanitizer, and memories no one spoke of. Jim sat in the waiting room, Tucker by his side as Patricia Walters, the facility's stern director, read over the proposal with furrowed brows. "You want to bring a retired military dog into therapy sessions with veterans who have PTSD. Jim nodded. "He's been through it, same as them. He understands." Patricia looked at Tucker, who sat in perfect stillness, eyes alert but calm. "Military dogs are tools, Mr. Wilson," she said. "Conditioned for combat, hypervigilance, sometimes aggression. Tucker saved a drowning boy. He's never shown aggression. He adjusts to people." "Adjusts." Jim nodded. "Calmer with kids. Sits differently with nervous folks. You'll see." Tucker chose that moment to rise and walk quietly over to Patricia. He laid his head gently on her lap. No demand, no expectation. Just contact. Just trust. She froze. Then slowly her hand came down to rest on his head. The silence lingered. "That's persuasive," she finally said. They struck a compromise. Tucker would begin supervised visits once a week with veterans who volunteered. In parallel, he and Jim would undergo formal therapy dog training. The first session was with Marjorie Edelston, a retired canine handler, who specialized in transitioning working dogs to therapy roles. She took one look at Tucker and smiled. "Oh, you've got stories, don't you?" Over 3 intense hours, she tested Tucker's responses. Crowds, sudden noises, strangers' touch. He passed everything with the calm of a soldier who'd already seen the worst. "He's exceptional," she said. "Military dogs are selected for bomb-proof temperaments. His instincts are intact, but he's not rigid. That's rare." She handed Jim a manual and a blue vest. "We won't teach him new tricks, just redirect the ones he already has." Their first official assignment came from the Mapleton Library's children's reading program. Kids who were anxious to read aloud would now have an audience of one silent, non-judgmental German shepherd named Tucker. Jim explained it gently to the group of parents. "He's a war hero. Now he helps in a different way." And Tucker, in his blue vest, sat regally on the reading mat, like he was born for this second life. The children approached Tucker with timid curiosity. Most giggled and pet his ears before reading, emboldened by his calm. But one boy, Caleb, stayed hidden behind his mother. "He has selective mutism," she whispered. "He hasn't spoken aloud in over a year. Anxiety locks him up." Jim knelt beside the boy. "Tucker's a good listener. Doesn't talk much either." Caleb peeked out. Tucker, sensing something unspoken, slowly lowered himself to the floor, head resting on his paws, posture soft and open. No commands, no prompts, just intuition. The boy stepped forward and sat cross-legged, opened a picture book, and began to whisper. At first the words were vapor, barely sound, but page by page his voice gained strength. By the 3rd page his mother was quietly crying. By the 5th, the room was still. When he finished, Caleb touched Tucker's ear. "He didn't laugh when I messed up." "He never would," Jim said. "That's not who he is." Word of Tucker's gift. spread. A wait list formed for the reading program. Tucker's presence seemed to unlock something, especially in children who felt misunderstood. He'd lie flat for the shy ones, sit up straight for the confident ones, and offer a paw to those who needed touch more than words. At home, Tucker began to shift too. He still patrolled the perimeter at night, still slept facing the front door. But now he occasionally brought Jim toys, small gestures that weren't play, but something gentler. A shared rhythm. One night, he dropped a tennis ball at Jim's feet and sat. Jim threw it. Tucker fetched it not with puppy exuberance, but with deliberate grace. A quiet offering. Then came their expansion to Maple Pines Nursing Home, where elderly veterans lived, tucked away from the world. Some hadn't spoken in months. In the common room, Tucker moved gently from chair to chair, allowing slow hands to stroke his fur. Faces softened. One man cried. Another simply said "Scout Dog" and smiled. But it was George Parker, a Korean war vet, who hadn't spoken since his stroke, who showed what Tucker truly could do. Tucker didn't nudge or beg attention. He simply laid at George's feet and waited. After nearly 20 minutes, George's hand dropped to the scar behind Tucker's ear. His voice emerged gravelly, stunned by its own sound. "Good dog, brave." From that day on, George spoke again. Tucker's world expanded, 3 therapy sites, dozens of lives touched, and a home that felt more like purpose than retirement. Children read with more confidence. Veterans reconnected with buried memories. Elderly hands found something warm to hold again. But not everyone was convinced. Richard Thompson resurfaced. Jim hadn't seen him since the fair. Now he stood at the door of the Veterans Center, shifting uncomfortably. "Wilson," he muttered. "The HOA board's meeting tomorrow. Your case is on the agenda." "My case?" "The dangerous animal complaint. It's still active. I can't withdraw it." "Procedure." Jim's jaw clenched. "After everything Tucker's done," Thompson sighed. "Not everyone's seen it. But for what it's worth, I was wrong about your dog." That night, Jim sat with Tucker on the porch, the last of the autumn light, painting the fields in gold. "Looks like we're not done fighting, boy." Tucker leaned against his leg in silence. The Mapleton Community Center had never seen a crowd like this. Folding chairs lined the walls. Voices buzzed in anticipation. Jim stood near the back with Tucker at his heel. Harold stood beside him, cane in hand, tired but determined. Susan from the library had brought parents of the children Tucker helped. Mary from the nursing home carried handwritten letters from residents. Even Dr. Sanders had driven in to speak. At the front, the HOA board shuffled papers as Evelyn Cartwright called the meeting to order. The agenda includes a formal complaint regarding a German Shepherd owned by Mr. Wilson. Thompson stood, clearing his throat. "While I did file the original complaint, recent events have changed my position. The dog has shown no aggression. In fact, he's become an asset to this community." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Evelyn frowned but nodded. "Duly noted. But others still have concerns." Jim stepped forward, Tucker moving in sync beside him. "This is Tucker. He served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He's now a certified therapy dog helping our children, our elderly, and our veterans. What he does, it changes lives." He spoke of Caleb George, the drowning boy. The silence was reverent. Then one by one, others rose to speak. Parents, staff, veterans. Each voice added weight. Each story chipped away at doubt. But it wasn't enough for everyone. Frank Miller, a concerned neighbor, stood up. "I respect what this dog has done. But German Shepherds are powerful animals. What if a child makes a sudden move? What if something sounds like gunfire? One mistake, and we're facing a tragedy." More murmurs. Margaret Wheeler, a board member, chimed in. "Tucker visits the elementary school. Has the school board even approved that? Before Jim could respond, Principal Beth Collins stood. The board unanimously approved Tucker's visits. He's supervised. Parents consent. He's helped reduce behavioral incidents by 70%. His presence is not a risk, it's a gift. But then the door swung open. In walked Darlene Winters, the school counselor, leading a young boy clutching a wrinkled drawing. Joel Mercer, third grader, known for violent outbursts, known for sorrow buried under rage. He asked for Tucker. Darlene explained. He had an incident today. We had to come. Joel trembled. Tucker broke his perfect sit, walking slowly low and soft until he reached the boy. Joel fell to his knees and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, burying his face in Tucker's fur. The room hushed. He's the only one who doesn't get scared when I get mad, Joel said. Everyone else backs away. But Tucker just stays. Darlene explained Joel had nearly hurt himself today. Usual interventions failed. This was his idea. He keeps this drawing of Tucker in his pocket. Says it helps. Joel opened his hand, showing the crumpled sketch, a stick figure, and a scarred German shepherd. But today, Joel whispered, I needed the real one. Margaret hesitated. What happens when Tucker's gone? What happens to that boy? Joel looked up, his voice clearer than ever. My dad died in Afghanistan. People don't last forever. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't love them while they're here. Silence. Not even a cough. Then suddenly Tucker stiffened. He moved toward the back of the room, toward an elderly man slumped in a chair. Jim saw it instantly. Tucker's alerting, he said. Call 911. The man, Howard Gaines, a Korean War veteran, was in cardiac distress. Tucker had known before anyone. As the paramedics wheeled Howard out, he reached for Tucker's head. Good dog, he whispered. You knew before I did. When the vote came, it was unanimous. The complaint dismissed, an exemption added for certified therapy animals. Jim didn't speak. He just looked down at Tucker, who sat quietly at his side, eyes calm and watching. They'd won. Outside the community center, victory hung in the air, but Tucker didn't move with triumph. His steps were slow, measured. His back legs trembled as he tried to climb into the truck. Then he simply sat and looked at Jim. It wasn't submission. It was quiet pain. Dr. Sanders met them at the clinic. Her expression tightened the moment she saw Tucker walk. He's been hiding it, she murmured. They're trained to push through. They don't show weakness. Dr. Harding, the vet, worked late that night. Tucker endured the exam with stoic silence, only wincing when she touched his lower spine. X-rays confirmed the worst degenerative myelopathy, common in older German shepherds, irreversible, relentless. It will take his legs, she said gently, and eventually, his ability to stand, to walk, to breathe on his own. How long? Jim's voice cracked. Maybe 6 months, maybe less. Tucker lay on the table, eyes clear and steady. As if he knew. That night, for the first time, he slept beside Jim's bed. His breathing was deep, slow, eased by medication. But the weight of what was coming hung like fog. The days that followed carved a new rhythm into their lives. Morning meds wrapped in peanut butter. Gentle harnesses for support. Visits shortened to avoid strain. Tucker still wore his vest. Still listened to children read. Still greeted veterans with his measured gaze. But Jim saw the decline. The library brought in orthopedic beds. The kids gathered around him like monks around a sacred fire. Joel visited often. He'd sit beside Tucker for hours in silence, reading or just being. He's teaching me how to be brave, the boy said. He hurts, but he doesn't get mean or scared. He just keeps going. The community responded with kindness. A fundraiser covered Tucker's medications. Richard Thompson brought over a handmade ramp. Mary from Maple Pines arranged for a canine massage therapist. But none of it could stop what was coming. By December, Tucker's steps grew clumsy. He fell. He wet the floor. And when he did, the shame in his eyes pierced deeper than any wound Jim had carried from war. Dr. Harding adjusted the meds. "We'll keep him comfortable. You'll know when it's time." Jim nodded but couldn't yet speak the words aloud. The farmhouse quieted in winter. Snow tapped softly against the windows. Tucker no longer rose when Jim moved about the house. He lay in the living room, regal on his orthopedic bed eyes, tracking every movement, tail occasionally thumping, once a slow salute. Therapy visits shifted to home. Children arrived in small groups, sitting on the floor near Tucker. He greeted them with slow blinks, patient sighs, and his now familiar stillness. Joel came the most, resting against the dog's side, whispering stories, or sometimes nothing at all. "He doesn't talk, but I can still hear him," Joel said once. "He's like a quiet song." Harold visited every Sunday. He brought old photos, shared stories of David, and read aloud from books his son had once loved. Tucker always stirred at Harold's voice, his ears twitching, his eyes softening. They shared a silence more intimate than words. On one particularly cold night, Harold said, "David used to say, Tucker could read souls, knew what people needed before they did." He paused, stroking the fur behind Tucker's ear. "And I think he's passing that on. To the boy, to you, to all of us." Jim felt it too. Tucker wasn't just enduring the end. He was teaching it. How to face pain with grace. How to leave slowly, but fully present. One morning, Tucker didn't lift his head. Not even for Joel. Jim sat beside him, running a hand over his scarred frame. "You're tired," he whispered. "You've done enough." Dr. Harding came to the house. There was no rush, no needle yet, just the quiet recognition that the time was near. Jim lay beside Tucker that night, the old soldier and his four-legged shadow. Snow fell outside. Inside, time slowed to breath and warmth. "I'll carry the rest," Jim said. "You can let go when you're ready." Tucker closed his eyes. His chest rose, fell, and for a long, silent stretch that was enough.